Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rui Diaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle!
The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is campeón! All creatures great and small!
¡De la Vega! ¡No me pongo de pie! ¡De rodillas!
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder at Heart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Cup seriously.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes on the Sounder at Heart podcast network. I am Jeremiah O'Shan. It is Friday. We are at Long Acres, and I am, of course, joined by my partner in crime, Niko Moreno. Welcome back, Niko.
Hey, what's going on, Jeremiah? Sounder at Heart family, what is going on? Excited to be on. It is a Friday that felt like a big game's coming up. There was a little bit of, I don't know, something different, a little prestige that they put us in the big room for Brian's, conference. Got more than 15 minutes out of him. I mean, it was like 20 actually.
20 minutes, and he went on. He talked a lot about Christian Roldan's call up to the national team and really filled up the notebook as far as that goes. But one of the things I thought was interesting is I asked him about how this week's prep differs, and he did not play the whole, this is just another game kind of thing. He was like, no, we're doing extra film work. We're extra sharp in training. He treated this, he wanted to put out the image that this is a big game, that they are preparing for it like it's a big game, and that this is not just another match. This is whether it's the Timbers, whether it's their form, whether it's the end of the season, whatever it is, he wanted us to know they're taking this week very seriously.
And I think it's the perfect recipe for a good performance, Jeremiah. I think that Brian is utilizing what I would call a perfect storm of circumstances that are making this game feel like a final, feel like it's a huge game, a huge moment, because of everything that we've been talking about lately is the lack of results over the last couple of games. It's the fact that it is the Timbers. It's the fact that the Timbers have had your number at home for as long as they have. It is a need for you to best utilize your team to get them trending in the right direction before the playoffs. So, to me, I did hear a Brian Smetzer that is going in with everything he has on the table. This is where he needs to make sure that his team is performing. He understands where things have gone wrong, the mental lapses, soft goals, those sort of things have been emphasized this week. And you'd hope that the execution is there for this team and they get a win. I mean, to be quite honest, I think it's going to be a difficult game because of injuries. I think it's going to be a difficult game because I do think that Portland makes a habit of just playing the Sounders differently. And there are some good players in this, just Portland, we'll talk about. But in all senses, I think that Brian is getting the team ready so they're up from the first minute. From the first whistle on, I feel like this team is going to be on. And I think that's what they need to do to get a good result. If not a win against the Timbers.
Oh, I totally agree. And I think that one of the things that, we didn't specifically ask Brian this and it was sort of in the back of my mind that last year he got really annoyed with me when I asked about their record against the Timbers at home. But I do think that's sort of the undercurrent. The Sounders have not beaten the Timbers at Lumen Field in the regular season since 2017. Since May 27th of 2017, they have played each other 9 times in the regular season since then. The Sounders have the Sounders are something. The last 2 games have been ties. You could argue that the Sounders, and this was something that Christian alluded to when we talked to him about this, and he took it a little bit more, like I did ask him a little bit more straightforward about not beating the Timbers for so long. But he just mentioned how there's always these mental lapses when they play the Timbers. Last year it was, or I don't know if it was a mental lapse, but it was Obed Vargas getting a red card for dissent, which was honestly one of the worst calls I have ever seen. I mean, it was an unbelievably harsh red card. That said, the year before that, the Sounders were up 2-0. They got a red card. That was the Leo Chu jersey removal, which is his first card, but then he got a second red card. They blow a 2-0 lead at home. Then the game before that, they lost 3-0. That was the banner unveiling game where I believe it was Jackson Reagan got a red card in that game.
Yes, it was.
And so the Sounders have just had a hard time being composed, especially at home against the Timbers. And it seems like whether or not they're explicitly talking about the past, there is this trend that they're very aware of, that they want to play a full 90, that they want to be as concentrated as possible, that they don't want to sort of, because when they've not been good this year, it seems like it's usually a result of them just they're being their own worst enemy. It's not that they don't have the talent. It's not that they don't, we've seen this team play very well against very good opponents recently. But when they are not playing well, it is almost always them shooting themselves in the foot, whether it's stupid red cards, whether it's penalties, whether it's, whatever else. And I think that's what they're really trying to avoid against the Timbers.
And in my opinion, I think that it has been mental. And the reason why it has been mental is because the Sounders on the broader spectrum have been so much more successful than the Timbers, that they always seem to have bigger things to prepare for, bigger things in their horizon. The perfect one is when you're talking about the red card for Jackson Reagan. It was that was the unveiling of the CCL title,
right? And
that game was terrible. I mean, he got out of hand.
Yeah.
And I do think that there has been a sense as a group, and I know that Brian does a good job because he does feel this rivalry deep in his heart. But as a group, it does feel like they have lessened the importance of the game because they've been honestly playing for bigger things.
Right.
Now, I don't agree with it, and I'm not saying that that's what every single one of these players thinks, but if I had to think about a common denominator, that would be the one.
Well, and I think that, MLS, we've said this many times, MLS is a league where the margins are really small and the talent level is pretty even across the teams. Certainly, there's never been a point at which the Sounders are so much better than the Timbers that they can just sort of like get by on, their talent alone. And, it was a couple of years ago where Brian basically said, I don't know that this is a rivalry anymore. And they've come back from that. But there was a point where he was really questioning his team's mindset going into this game. And I think they've corrected that in the years since. In the last 4 meetings, they're 1-1-2. So they've gotten 2 ties and they've gotten 1 win and gotten 1 loss. So it's not like the recent results are that far off. But I do think that this, at least the message they're putting out right now is, no, we're focused on this game. This is a big one. And there's a lot of reasons that it's a big one. And not the least of which is, even on paper, this is their last best chance to get something close to a full strength squad on the field together before the playoffs. Because next week they're going to be missing a whole bunch of players. They're going to be missing Christian Roldan, we just found out. They're going to be missing Snyder Burnell. They're probably going to be missing Georgie Manungu. They're going to be missing Nuhu. They might be missing Obed. They might be missing Reed. There's a lot of bodies that are going to be missing next week against RSL, a team they should still be able to beat, but it is not their best team. And then they're going to go to New York City FC, which is notoriously one of the toughest places to play. They're doing a cross-country trip for the last game of the season, which is ridiculous. That no one should have to be doing that, but whatever, that's what it is. They're going to be playing it on a baseball field. And so this is really their, if they're going to kind of climb out of this postseason slump, this is where it has to start.
And you I don't know if you mentioned Snyder. I feel like that's one.
Snyder was another. He's getting into the youth national team.
Yeah, so I wanted to just make sure because I thought that was interesting because that center midfield position, which is the main feature of your system, is decimated.
Yes.
I don't even know. I mean, JP, for all that I've been able to find out, he feels ready at 80 to 90% ready and available, but he hasn't played 90 in forever
at all. And
he hasn't played at all, right? So what happens there? How do you the Sounders have been good at makeshifting, players to add there, but because of the importance of the two center midfielders, that's a concern, right? So you're absolutely right. That adds on to my perfect storm theory that the Sounders need to just put all their eggs in this basket, come out and play to the level and with the intensity in which they played that final here for Leagues Cup, where they were relentless, where they were a team that was connecting, that was dynamic, that seemed to be as clinical as they've been, that had a whole volume of play. But defensively, they were on 90 minutes. They barely allowed Miami to get in front of goal. There was a couple that obviously they missed, but that's what they need against this specific Timbers team. Because look, Matias Rojas is a phenomenal player when it comes to mid-range shots, when it comes to set pieces. He is a very creative player. I think Anthony is by far the best player on that team. He could do absolutely everything on the ball. He's great on one-on-one. He has also a great mid-range shot. He can finish. He's a guy that I think is going to overload your right side because it's going to be him and Mosquera on that side. So the defending left side for the Sounders, they're going to overload. They're going to push. They're going to be very intense in their attack. So I've said it on Monday. I say it again today. Seattle's going to have to outscore the Timbers. I would be surprised if they don't allow a goal. Now, if they don't, man, that's amazing. That's great. That's credit to the Sounders. But a lot of the responsibility, I think, for this game is going to be on the offense. It's going to be on Jordan Morris, a guy that, we just talked to this week, and he seems to be on. He understands the magnitude of this game. He understands that he just got to start where he wasn't great, but I don't blame him because the whole team was disjointed in that first 45 minutes because of the two early substitutions, the injuries. So this is his game. He is the Seattle kid, right? He's the one that, as he said, has lived it in the stands, has lived it on the pitch. Now he gets to really come out here and prove it in a huge game. It's a must win.
It's a must win, and his personal record against the Timbers is not too good. He only has one goal in 19 appearances, I believe. And so this would be a great chance for him to, I don't read too. I mean, obviously this is, a lot of different opponents in those 19 games. So it's like, I don't think there's something about the Timbers that are making him bad, but it's the numbers are the numbers, and this would be a great game for him to break out. He's been it does look like they're gearing him up to start again this week. He has been pretty good actually when despite not being on the field, he's mostly gotten himself into good spots. He's actually done a pretty good job of finishing the chances that he has. But the last time he scored was way back in March, because he's been hurt almost all the time.
Right, of course.
Then. But, he it's easy to forget, but he started the season off absolutely on fire. He had 4 goals in his first 8 appearances, and a bunch of those were off the bench. So, in limited minutes, he's been pretty effective. And this is going to be a huge opportunity for him, especially.
Yeah, no, I think that he knows that. I think that in this particular game, he's playing a defense that's not great. They are maybe not as bad as Miami has been at times. But against Dallas, just the last game, I mean, that was a very gappy defense. And I feel like if there's a guy that could get behind the defense, is a guy like Jordan Morris. And considering the positions and the opportunities that he had against Austin, I see this game going a lot similar to that. I think him and Jesus Ferreira are going to be the duo to watch in this game. And I don't know why I get a feeling like that's going to be the key to a successful attack for the Sounders team.
I have really liked the partnership that Jesus and Jordan have had in their relatively brief time. They seem to really like playing with each other. They seem to really understand what the other one wants to do. Jordan has just spoken absolutely glowingly of playing with Jesus. Jesus has said really good things about playing with Jordan. That is a partnership that has a lot of potential, and hopefully we get to see more of it as this season progresses and, hopefully into the playoffs. The other interesting thing, you touched on this earlier with the situation at center mid. Do we want to make any, there's a few potential things that they could do. They could start Snyder again, or they could move Albert back, or I suppose they could start Leyva. Which of those for you is the most intriguing?
The most intriguing for me. So
I guess they could start JP too, although it does not seem particularly likely.
Yeah, I'm the type of person that I want my highest contributor, my highest goal contributor to be closer to goal. So I am not a huge fan of Albert dropping a line. I understand it, and I feel like obviously he's a guy that has, most recently this year has looked more dynamic. He's looked like he wants to do a lot more defending and things that maybe in the past I haven't really thought that he does a lot of. Now, he's played the pivot before when he first got here.
But he was not necessarily a high volume defender.
Correct. And that's kind of part of why, look, I understand that maybe on the distribution part and on the experience part, he's going to be able to connect a lot, but he's a guy that maybe this year has upped his level of defense. So I get why he's an option and why Brian has clearly shown us that he wants to play him there. But at the same time, I would love to, at one point or another, get JP there. I don't know where he's at physically in game rhythm, game fitness, but I feel like he's the guy that I would want next to Christian. And then obviously when Christian is gone, that's going to be where you kind of figure out what you're doing. You might be forced to play JP and Albert there because you don't really have anything else there. You could play Alex there. You could play Kalani there. But I feel like maybe the Albert JP duo that at one point was a thing when he first got here, maybe you want to revive that.
I mean,
maybe
led it to a Champions League.
That's right. So the big question mark is where JP's at. But for me, that's what I would like to see. Now, I would love Danny Leyva to get, the play time. I just don't know if this particular game would be the one I want to see him in. Yeah. And I've liked him more in a higher role. So if maybe you are obligated to play with Albert next to Christian, I would like to see Danny Leyva at the 10, just to see how it works out. You start with Ferreira on the right side, and then if it's not working out, you remove Danny Leyva, you bring in Paul Rothrock, and then you start Ferreira at the 10. But I would like to see it at one point just fit that way.
You really want to see JP play some this week, though, even if it's not starting, because he's almost certainly going to have to start against RSL. There's just not other options. If he's able to play, he needs to start, because there's just, like I said, there's just not very many. But so you would like to get him some, 15, 30 minutes maybe against Portland. The other interesting one is Pedro de la Vega, who we've talked about a lot over the recent weeks, even in his not playing. But this does seem like an opportunity to see what they, one of the things that Brian said today is like, we want to test him out essentially and see how his knee feels. And if he can get through it, great. But they need to really test it out. And so it seems like we'll see, he all but guaranteed that Pedro is going to play against Portland. This seems like a good opportunity for that.
After hearing Brian talk about Pedro today, I would think that you start him. And here's why. I remember Siggy, rest in peace, would tell me, if there's a guy that I don't know where he's at physically and I'm trying to test the injury, I'd rather have him on when he starts because he has a longer time to warm up before the game starts. You get to activate the muscles. You get to look at where that knee or that, ligament or whatever it is that you're kind of being careful with is at right before the game. You might have to do a scratch right before the game. And then once you get on, then you have a sub. If it's 50 minutes, 20 minutes, and something happens, something goes wrong, you can replace them. To add on to that, we've kind of established that Pedro needs to start to find the game to get himself in the best positions to be effective and successful. So everything to me makes me believe that Pedro will start this game.
And that's an exciting prospect. He has been, I think it's funny we think about this. He has been so dynamic when he's been on the field. He really is an X factor. And I've said this before, but when he is on the field, it gives the Sounders just another level that they can reach. And I think maybe more so than any other one player is that Pedro de la Vega, and it's not because he is every minute being relentless. It's just that his moments of brilliance have a potential to just lift the team in ways that, other players he's that talented. We see him out at training. This week, another great week of training for him where he's just banging in goal after goal after goal, sending in these beautiful crosses, doing all this stuff. And it's just a good reminder of when this guy is on, he is a really special player.
It's his creativity. It is his incisiveness. It is how defined he's with the ball, is the work rate that he brings to the table. I just think that specifically for this game, if we're talking about a team that a lot like the Miami team where Cello on that right back side is more of an attacker. Mosquera is similar. He's great getting forward, but he has a hard time defending. So if I'm going to exploit a part of the field, it's going to be with Pedro, getting behind him, pushing him, pulling him, really making him almost anchor him back. So it works in so many ways. So yeah, for me, Pedro is a guy that, as you mentioned and we've talked about, he's the X factor for this team because he has just so many tools in his shed. He has so many ways to influence the game. And he's a guy that it doesn't matter what minute he's been on the field, he could pull magic out of his head in any moment. That rabbit is there for him to just grab and take it out. It's just about when he's going to do it. So there is no other player in this team that I feel comfortable saying that in any moment he's going to be able to do that. And that's why he's so important, right? So to me, this game with, we just talked about Jordan, we talk about Ferrer, we talk about Pedro. That is an offense that, man, it has a lot of potential, but they have to play 90 minutes and they have to be on. And this is the game where, maybe you started. You need to trend this team in the right direction. And that's what we've talked about it. It's not about the standings. It's not even necessarily about the rivalry. It's about getting this team going.
Yeah, no, I would agree with all that. That it's at this point, it's more important than, okay, you haven't beaten the Timbers at home in a long time. That's an interesting stat, but it's not that important. Ultimately, what's important is getting this team rolling, getting this team ready for the playoffs. Again, we've talked about this, is that they're going to finish between 5 and 7 almost no matter what they do. There's very little movement that's left to happen within the Western Conference standings. It's not about that. It's about getting yourself playing as well as possible. And it has to really start tonight, or not tonight, tomorrow.
Yeah, and I guess the other one that we haven't touched on is Alex Roldan.
Yeah,
he seems to be full on. He seemed to be healthy enough to be available.
Yeah, and in fact, I think Brian actually said he would be available.
Yeah, so he will be available, but does he start? I think that maybe it's hard to see a better option, I guess, to start off the game. You could always go with Kalani,
yeah.
Right? But Kalani has had some ups and downs as of lately. I was surprised that Brian talked about him plateauing a little bit, which is, is fair.
It is fair. I think that ever since they've come back from Leagues Cup, Kalani has not been able to find the same form that he found. And I think part of that is the circumstances of the games, the opponents. He's not a guy that you can just roll out against every opponent and expect the same kind of performance. He's still at the point of his career where he is at his best when he's able to get in transition. He's at his best when he's able to use his physicality and when the games are not quite as tactical and technical. But, that might actually be a good matchup for this one because, there is potentially some gaps there. But, why don't we take a break? We'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more specifically about the Timbers and some of the challenges they're going to pose. You're listening to No Sarietas. Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart podcast network, which now includes No Sarietas, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible through our paid subscribers. Plans start as low as $30 a year and allow us to remain independent and mostly ad-free. Subscribers get access to all our written and podcast content, including a full-text RSS feed and a mostly ad-free podcast feed that includes every show in one spot. If you really like what we're doing, though, I'd encourage you to sign up at our higher tiers, which include all sorts of various perks. The most popular of those is our members-only Discord, where the real Sounders sickos hang out. I know I've called this group the smartest, funniest, and best-informed Sounders fans in the world, but it's more than the rough equivalent of a Sounders Mensa meeting. Discord is where we make things happen, like for real. You know the promotion the Sounders ran that offered fans the opportunity to trade in their Messi jersey for a Paul Rothrock one? That originated in our community. You'll not only be the first to know about stuff, but you also have a semi-direct line to the movers and shakers at the Sounders organization. If you want to be one of the totally normal people who occupy the Sounder at Heart Discord, just become a supporter of Sounder at Heart. Anyway, thanks for listening and go Durs. No Sarietas, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Haxon Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Haxon Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at haxonferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code SOUNDERATHEART, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to haxonferments.com, use the code SOUNDERATHEART at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Haxon Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart podcast network. Welcome back to Nos Arietes. All right, Timbers are sitting 2 points behind the Sounders in the standings. They have played one more game. So theoretically, even if the Sounders lose this game, they could still pass the Timbers just by winning their game in hand. So it's not so much the standings that are important, but there's a lot else going on here. What can you tell us about the Timbers? They are coming off a tie against Dallas. They've only won 3 times in the last few months. But this is a team that still poses some real danger.
They do. I feel like they're a team that, a lot like the Sounders, there are times that they could find a lot of volume offensively, like that midweek game against Vancouver where they just dominated the chances in the first 45, if not 50 minutes of that game. It was interesting because in that game, they played with a backline of 3, which is something that I think Phil has been dabbling with and kind of putting that in his bag. When that does happen, he likes to play with Anthony as that wing back in that side. And I feel like it does set them up to stop counters and stop quick transition moments because Sermon, Superich, and Miller kind of do a good job at just having just 3 big guys there in the middle. They do allow Miller to get forward a little bit more. And Miller's been a guy that at times has played as a left back, for that team. So to me, the fortitude of this team is on the wide areas. They want to get the ball out quick. I feel like Matias Rojas has added a set piece threat that maybe they didn't necessarily have in the past. But the big question mark is the 9 position. Kelsey has been as inconsistent as he has been since he arrived in the league. He seems to be a guy that at times could feel like he could be this phenomenal striker, but for the most part, to be quite honest, has been underwhelming. And the other guy's Felipe Mora, a guy that loves to play the Sounders. I've talked to Felipe. He loves scoring in the Sounders. So he is a guy that I would be very careful. Now, I think he's going to start. He'd be the guy that when you have that desire to score in a team, that's the guy you want on. And he's a very mobile guy. He understands where to be. This is where the team misses Yamar Gomez Andrade. Not any shade on Kim, not any shade on Jackson, but when it comes to really limiting a guy like that, that's who I want on. Now, I know that Yamar has been on. One more has had a couple of good games, but in that game, there was the red card game with Jackson Reagan, so there have been some circumstances. But with the level of play that Yamar has given you this year, man, that's a guy I would like to have against a guy like Mora. But to just conclude it all, I'm not painting you a juggernaut on the attacking end, but I am giving you an outlook on a team that has talented players that could expose the Sounders if they allow soft goals that we've talked about, just easy giveaways if there isn't a communication level that you want in. And that's why, to me, you need to start Alex. I feel like you need your four most highest floor, most experienced guys, so those sort of situations don't happen. The Timbers press is interesting as well. It kind of fluctuates, but when they do press high, I feel like they are effective on that press. So yeah, that's kind of what this team has provided in a little bit of a nutshell.
So David DaCosta is one of the players who has been, when they're good, David DaCosta has been oftentimes the guy who's in the middle of it for him. What have you made of him? It seems like he's slowed down a little bit after a really good start.
I feel like he slowed down a lot. Obviously, to me, he was never going to be Evander, but that's not necessarily a terrible thing, because if what we've seen out of Evander in Cincinnati is that despite how good he is, because God, is he good, a lot of times it's all about Evander, right? Yeah. Evander just kind of, the ball transitions through him, it gravitates to him. He's your goal scorer, he's your goal distributor, he's putting set pieces on. DaCosta seems to be a guy that just links up better.
A little more facilitator.
More of a facilitator. He's very creative. He's good on the ball. He could be goal dangerous, but not good. Not enough for me to consider him a threat, to be quite frank. But he's a guy that might put it away because he does make good runs inside the box. But mainly, I think he's more of a distributor, more of a guy that's gonna get your wingers or your wingbacks involved, and a guy that's gonna really look to service in your nine.
And then one of the players that's new to this team since we last saw them is a Norwegian player named Christopher Velde, who is, he's a flary type of player. He likes to dribble. He likes to shoot from distance. He's not necessarily a statistical darling, but he is someone that can create some real high moments. He's almost, he's like almost like a Ryan Kent in some ways. Yeah,
he's another guy that likes to get wide, likes to play on the wide areas. Physicality is definitely there for him, but his first touch, a lot of times to me, just doesn't sit well for what I want out of a player that high up the field. I think that he finds the game well, but I don't know if maybe with the system that they're playing, he's been able to kind of get a little bit more influence, but he just hasn't been as impactful as you would think a guy would come in later in the season, and then has been a starter for this squad. He has been a starter,
yeah. He's got 2 assists basically since he came, and then it's also kind of interesting that Zuparic has kind of come back into this team. Early in the year, he was relegated to essentially playing in Open Cup. He was one of the starters against Defiance when Defiance played the Timbers earlier this year. Him and McGraw. McGraw is a player who's oddly also kind of completely disappeared from their regular rotation. But yeah, their defense is sort of set up similar to the Sounders in that it's technically a back four, but really Kamal Miller's been playing as a left back, but he's like more of a stay-at-home left back, and Mosquera is effectively another winger.
Yeah, don't let the Kamal Miller banger distracted from the
Yeah.
fact that he's not an attacking.
No, that was
defender,
that was when I saw that was Kamal Miller. I was like, where did that come
It
from?
was a hell of a goal. It was
a hell of a
It was
goal.
one of those that never come back, right? I mean, it was the perfect bounce, the
Right.
perfect connect on the ball, and it went right in. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that regardless of whether at times they sit more with three or they play with a four-man back line, a lot of times he's going to be the guy that stays back because you do have a guy like Mosquera that you want higher up the field, right? You need him to be a guy that's going to give you that width. And honestly, there's a lot of times where you need another player to add on to Anthony because of what we just said about David Acosta. He doesn't necessarily have the dynamism to get to certain spots, but when Mosquera and Anthony are both up higher on the field, they do look a lot more dangerous.
Yeah. So just to give a little bit more context, that was his 4th career MLS goal and his first since 2022. Quite a goal to score. If people missed this, it was a half volley basically from about 30 yards out against the Whitecaps that just came absolute thunderstrike. It was kind of amazing where it came from. But then sort of since that goal, they've struggled a little bit.
Yeah.
In the second half against Vancouver, they were dramatically outplayed. They were very lucky to get out of Vancouver with a point. And then
Dallas was the same thing.
And then Dallas, they twice had the lead and they twice blew the lead. And they had a really hard time putting away a pretty mediocre to maybe bad Dallas team.
And I think a lot of it comes because there is a lack of possession from their midfield. They don't really play through it, and I feel like they have a hard time managing games because of it. They've rotated that pivot consistently. Sometimes it's Ayala.
Yeah.
With Rojas. Rojas is a guy that's going to give you rarely any real defensive presence there. So, you know, they've been able to at times put Charai in, who, despite him being 39, he is a guy that you want in this sort of games because if there's a timber for life, it's Chara,
yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
he's a guy that can still run, can still carry. He's going to push. He's going to grind. He's going to really give you that defensive pressure. So that's why I think that he might be a guy that's going to be part of this team. Ortiz is a guy that also has been all around and kind of is coming off out of this team. So there are some question marks about who's going to be starting in that midfield.
Interesting. Well, and it does seem like at goalkeeper now, Pentemis is essentially reestablished himself as a starter. I know they keep kind of going back and forth between Crepeau and him, but Pentemis seems to have taken the spot.
Yeah, and he's good. I don't know if I can think of any game where, you know, I have put a goal on him necessarily. Oh, well, maybe not. Yeah, no, not any. So he's a decent goalkeeper there, but I think that the struggles there have been just mainly on defense. I think Finn Sermon has been probably their most consistent.
And Finn Sermon, people might remember, he made his MLS debut against the Sounders in last year, and he was fantastic in that game. And he's really been. I remember he saved a goal against the Sounders in the first game this year. It's been kind of like that. He's been very good for them. New Zealand international, young player. Really, I mean, honestly, a very good signing for them.
And aside from that, I think that neither of the other guys that we've talked about, Super or Kamal Miller, any of them, I think have the wheels to really keep up with this attack. And that has to be where you want to exploit this team. You got to get Jordan behind the center backs, because I guarantee you that Kamal Miller, sometimes he feels like he's got cement in the bottom of those shoes because he does struggle to get back. So being a guy that at times is kind of told to kind of push up a little bit more, can you expose those moments? Can you allow them get a little bit comfortable where they're pushing in? And that's why I think an early goal for the Sounders would be important, because you're kind of making Portland have to go out there and just add numbers forward. And with the issues that they have in midfield and the issues that they have with a little bit of speed in the center back areas, that is a perfect way that the Sounders can really take advantage of being at home from the very first minute. I think that Seattle needs to be that team that puts all the pressure on Portland. And if they get a goal, man, I think that it's a given that Seattle's going to have control of that game. Now, on the opposite end, if it's an early Portland goal, it'd be a struggle.
It's always.
Yeah.
Anytime you give up the first goal, it's always going to be a struggle.
Yeah. So for me, Seattle in this one should be looked at as the favorite because of everything that they've been able to do in this game. But when it comes to these derby games, you kind of just throw it all out. So that's why I tell people, they ask me, is Seattle a favorite? I was like, well, sure, you could say that. But in the reality of it is that Portland always comes out, and regardless of how they're doing in their season, they put it on the Sounders. And they're going to have to play a full 90, Jeremiah. They have to play a full 90, and it's something that, as Brian just mentioned, maybe it's a little bit of passion. And that's why I like what Paul Rothrock said this week, right? He talked about that. I feel like sometimes we got to protect our guys a little bit more. That's what I want to see out on that field. Now, I'm not saying go crazy and punch somebody or, throw a ball in somebody's face and get a red card, but let them know you're there. And if there is the moment, there was a moment against Portland where this young kid body checks somebody on the right side of the Sounders defense, and Paul Rothrock runs across the field to be like, hey man, but back up. And then Albert Rusnak lays some guy out in the other side of the field. That's what you need to do. You got to be able to go tit for tat when it comes to the physicality, because I guarantee you that Portland's going to want to come in here and act like they're going to just take it to the Sounders.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's probably a good place to put a pin in that. One other thing I wanted to talk about, just because it's been sort of a big topic this week around here, is Christian Roldan getting back into the national team. Now, this is his second consecutive call-up, and this one seems a little bit more, last one felt a little bit, first of all, he wasn't part of the initial squad. He was a late addition. He ended up playing a fair amount. I think he impressed, at least in his second appearance. And this one, though, he was part of he's part of what seems pretty close to an A team. Like, it wouldn't be like this won't be the exact roster that Pochettino brings to the World Cup, but it could be 20 odd players from the World Cup squad. This is a huge opportunity, and I think it says a lot about the strides that Roldan has made, considering he hadn't been called in for 2 years, to now get called into 2 straight camps, 2 straight friendlies that are the final 2 friendlies before we're in the World Cup year. It feels like it's there for the taking. Him to claim a spot if he can get in.
Absolutely, and I think he will get in. I think that everything that I've heard from Pochettino, everything that I heard from Christian today, because from the outside looking in, it feels like Christian can provide the exact things that Pochettino wants out of that role. And Pochettino is not asking the world out of that role. They want you to be defensively disciplined. They want you to be aggressive, cover a lot of field, bring energy, and to be quite honest, simplify your role as an attacker, where what we've seen out of Christian over the last 2 friendlies is that he's quick on the ball. He's going to turn it around and look for that pass first. Be positive with all your passing. And I know that there was a lot of people criticizing he had the one bad giveaway, and then people were really going back and going minute for minute on maybe some passes that weren't exactly perfect. But Christian tends to be a guy that's pretty good with the ball, conservative with the ball. So regardless of what people may think, I thought that he was key in a lot of transition moments during the last 2 friendlies that he played in. And that's why I think he's going to get in, because Christian will do what the coach asks him to do. He's a system guy that he shines here for the Sounders. He has a huge responsibility. He can play at the highest level. He's never going to give up. He's going to be a huge glue guy in the locker room. There's just so many things out of Christian that you want in a national team. So to me, yes, he'll get called up, obviously, to this one. I think he'll continue to play well. And I see him playing in the club, in the World Cup next year.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that Pochettino really likes about him, is that he wants someone that has that team, that I'm going to play for the crest, that I am going to hold my teammates accountable, that I'm going to raise the level in training, that everyone respects. And I think that they need some of those type of guys. And that's how he got into the previous World Cup team, not necessarily as a player. Like, it was almost like he was a coach in some ways. This time I feel like he's raised his level. He has a much more clearly defined role. and then you pair that with all the other off-field stuff. I like his chances a lot. I've liked his chances. I've long believed that if Pochettino brought him in and got an up close look at him, he would kind of fall in love with Christian Roldan, and that seems to be kind of what's happening.
Yeah, and Christian has made a career out of that, right? I mean, he's a guy that just has that ability to do so.
Just give me a shot. I mean, that's everywhere he's gone is like, just give me a shot, and I'll earn my minutes. And everywhere he goes, that's what happens.
And sometimes you need that underdog mentality. And look, if there's been something, and look, I'm not like way on the, I don't know, let's call it the right side, where they're saying that, these Weyas and the Pulisic's, they're these diva players that don't really play for the badge, and that, that's the problem with the U.S. national team. But I do think that there's something to that, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm also not on the other side, that you just need to have guys that are not talented and they only have intangibles. But I think that there's a middle ground, and I do believe that
you need a mix.
Yeah, you need a mix, and Christian Roldan, despite not being the most talented player in the pool of players, he is a guy that has all the intangibles plus a very good set of attributes that you could put in a system. And so to me, there's really a lot to what you just said. So you need someone that's going to feel the team, that's going to really get out here and just put everything he has into it. Luna is a similar guy, where he's going to be in there. He plays like an underdog. He's a chip on his shoulder, the size of, the world on top of him, because that's how he plays the game. And I think that Christian, very similarly, but additionally, his IQ is incredibly high. He's a guy that, as we mentioned, his motor, his engine is huge. He's got a V12 block in his chest. That's what you want out of it, right? So he's just the perfect guy for what I think Pochettino wants.
I would agree with all that, and that's probably a good place to put a pin in today's episode of What We Learned This Week. Niko, people can follow you, obviously, on Blue Sky, El Rolo NW. There, you are on Soccer Down Here. You're on Lobbing Scorchers. Anything else you got going on that you want to share with the people?
No, just go ahead and also check out Pulso Sports if there's ever on our YouTube, if there's interviews that maybe don't make it to the Sounders.
Well, we're trying to get some more coaches corners stuff going.
And we've been trying, but they have not allowed us to talk to many of the coaches lately. We've made some requests. We want to talk to Tommy. Maybe we'll have to just talk to Freddie, because I guess Tommy at this point in time, he's in a difficult role right now, right? But we're definitely going to get that back on Pulso Sports, and of course Sounder Our Heart.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, with all that said, I am Jeremiah Shan, signing off for Niko Moreno. This is No Sadietes, part of the Sounder Our Heart podcast network, and we'll catch you next time.
Let's go Sounders.